Hey guys, welcome back. I am back at least for the next few months now that I'm home for summer break after my first year of college. First year of college went quite well, so I'm happy to say that. Um, I'm back and I am coming to you straight with my first official forecast for this year's Atlantic hurricane season, the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season. So first, we're going to look at what the current official 2023 Atlantic hurricane season forecasts are from some of the major forecast areas, like TSR back in December as their first very preliminary forecast. They called for 13 named storms, 6 hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes. The new average now between 1991 to 2020 is about 14 named storms, about 7 hurricanes, and about 3 major hurricanes. And then their updated forecast back in the beginning of April, they called for 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, 2 majors. So they went a little lower than their original forecast, calling for a more below average season or so. However, the University of Arizona, UA, in early April released their first forecast and called for a fairly above average season, calling for 19 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes. And then Colorado State University, their first forecast in mid-April, they called for 13 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 2 major hurricanes, almost identical to the TSR's updated forecast from back in the beginning of April. And then the Weather Channel's first forecast in mid-April called for 15 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. So a about average to maybe slightly above average season. And then North Carolina State University in mid-April also released their first forecast, calling for 11 to 15 named storms, 6 to 8 hurricanes, and 2 to 3 major hurricanes. So calling for between a below average to maybe slightly above average hurricane season or so. And then PSU in the very beginning of May, the first day of May, they released their forecast, only calling for 12 to 20 named storms. They didn't release their forecast for hurricanes or major hurricanes. So they're really going kind of on extremes of like either it's going to be below average to maybe average to a good bit above average, particularly for named storms. So they're like, we don't know. And there's some factors for that. Now, we've already had one system officially added to this year's hurricane season. It wasn't officially named. It happened in mid-January, and I was just bringing that up real quick here, just because that does somewhat factor into my forecast just for one part of it. Now, we move forward, and I'm showing you the current ENSO that's occurring. It's and ENSO stands for El Niño Southern Oscillation. It's what in the Eastern Pacific it is the equatorial Pacific, and it depends on whether it's more above average sea surface temperature wise in that area. You can see that's particularly off the pretty far north western coast of South America through the equatorial Pacific, where my mouse is currently showing. And for the most part, it is showing quite above average sea surface temperatures, particularly for the central to eastern portions of that area. And you can see the current Niño 3.4 index, which is the main part of the El Niño region that we look for, is at a positive 0.507 degrees Celsius, which is indicative of showing that we are now somewhat going into that El Nino range. El Nino is positive 0.5 degrees Celsius and above. Neutral is between negative 0.5 Celsius and positive 0.5 Celsius. And then La Nina is anything below negative 0.5 Celsius. So you can see we've seen a rapid warmth in the 3.4 region. And so now in mid-May, we are well above, and we're now out of the neutral area. We're under an El Nino watch, in fact, and we are now currently just barely within that El Nino area of being just above that positive 0.5 degrees Celsius mark. So it looks like we will be transitioning fully into El Nino soon, if not already. Now, here's the ENSO forecast, and you can see between April, May, June, we are still said to be in neutral conditions. But then you can see a massive change as we get in between May, June, July, and onward through the rest of the hurricane season, even showing somewhat preliminarily all the way into the fall and into this upcoming winter. It fully changes to being basically we are guaranteed to be in El Nino conditions, percentages well around 80% and above, all the way up to even above 90% as we get towards the heart of hurricane season and towards the end of hurricane season. And you can see there's no chances at all of La Nina. Neutral conditions, which is the gray bar, really goes down after we get past July, particularly. And then, and as we get into like the middle of summer, really El Nino, which is the red bar, really takes over. It looks like so. This looks like this year's hurricane season will be likely controlled partly by an El Nino. Which that now brings us to the current Atlantic sea surface temperatures. And you can see widespread across the Atlantic. The Caribbean Sea is already showing 26, 27 degrees plus Celsius waters. So it's already getting quite warm, especially in the western Caribbean Sea. Gulf of Mexico generally in its warmest areas are about 26, 27, 28 degrees Celsius. And towards the Gulf Coast there, it's more around the 24, 25, maybe 26 degrees Celsius temperatures. And then the Gulf Stream, you can see it's already kind of outlined, shown off of the Florida and southeast coast there. But otherwise, generally quite cool conditions temperature-wise in the Atlantic, in the middle of the Atlantic particularly. The MDR, the main development region between Africa and the Leeward Islands and the Virgin Islands, is much warmer towards the west, towards those islands, with 26, 27 plus degrees Celsius waters. However, closer towards Africa, it's a good bit cooler, more towards the 23, 24, 25 degrees Celsius range. So definitely still has a lot of time to really warm up as we get towards the heart of the season. And the season hasn't even officially started. The official start of the season is June 1st. However, on May, we're in May now. May 15th, the National Hurricane Center started their regular tropical weather outlooks for the Atlantic. So National Hurricane Center is already hard at work starting their tropical weather outlooks for this year's hurricane season, even before the season officially started. However, they're not looking at any particular areas of interest for tropical development yet. So as of right now, the Atlantic is quiet. The Eastern Pacific, however, show you that in a sec. In the Eastern Pacific, however, we'll point out, looks like it could definitely be active, because when we get into an El Nino pattern, there are, and especially when the El Nino starts to get more towards like stronger El Nino, it does seem like the Eastern Pacific, Western Pacific get into a much more active phase. You think back to 2015 in particular is a perfect example. We were in a very strong El Nino. We were in a super El Nino. Now, I don't think we're going to be going into that type of an extreme El Nino as we get into later this year and stuff. But regardless to say, if you get towards the mid to stronger types of El Nino, the Eastern Pacific, Western Pacific do tend to have much more active seasons. In 2015, Eastern Pacific, we all know, is most memorable for producing Hurricane Patricia, which is the strongest tropical cyclone observed in at least the northern hemisphere around here, with sustained winds of 215 miles per hour and a minimum pressure of 872 millibars, just barely missing out on tying the global pressure record for a tropical cyclone, or just the global pressure record in general, with Typhoon Tip, which happened in 1970. Typhoon Tip's lowest pressure was 870 millibars. So, we think back to 2015, that had an El Nino, made the Eastern Pacific, Western Pacific quite active, the Atlantic, not too much. Atlantic had, like, I believe, more average conditions, maybe slightly below average conditions that year. So probably looking towards more of that type of conditions for the Atlantic in particular, probably around average to maybe slightly below average conditions, which now leads me to officially revealing my first 2023 Atlantic hurricane season forecast for you guys. Total named storms, as of right now, my first off the bat, I'm going to call for 12 to 14 named storms. So I'm going to call for slightly below average to average conditions. Total hurricanes, I'm calling for 4 to 6 hurricanes. So about average to somewhere around average or so for hurricanes. Total major hurricanes 2 to 3, so about average, maybe slightly below. Preseason storms. Now, in the past few Atlantic hurricane season forecasts I've put out, especially the first ones that I've put out in the past few years, from 2020 to 2022, I've particularly added this whole preseason storms forecast. I believe back in 2021 I added it. And I particularly said preseason named storms. Now, this year I said only preseason storms because of acknowledging the system we had back in January, which was not officially named by the National Hurricane Center. However, they did acknowledge that it was our first tropical or subtropical system of the hurricane season this year. So, but in any case, I'm not expecting us to see any other preseason storms or named storms prior to June 1st, the official start of the hurricane season. Otherwise, that will transition to the rest of the season. I think we will see 12 to 14 named storms, 4 to 6 hurricanes, 2 to 3 major hurricanes. Since we've already had one preseason storm, probably seeing another 11 to 13 named storms, and then hurricanes, major hurricanes. We'll see how many of those named storms end up reaching hurricane and major hurricane status. But for hurricane, major hurricane status, I think of the 12 to 14 named storms I'm calling for, 4 to 6 will be hurricanes and 2 to 3 will be major hurricanes, which will put us around average to slightly below average for as a whole for this year's hurricane season, I think. And I think that's a good call. I think current forecasts from like PSU and let's check once more. PSU and University of Arizona in particular, I would say are kind of in some ways, I think overanalyzing this season, and that might just be due to the fact of the El Nino, and they don't know how strong this El Nino will be, and as well mixed with how warm the Atlantic sea surface temperatures are already, and how much warmer they will become, obviously. So we will see, but it looks much more likely that this year will be the first Atlantic hurricane season we've had in, 7 years or so, at least, where it'll be at the least average, if not even slightly below average in terms of activity, and not these hyperactive or very active seasons that we've had ever since 2016, 2017 through last season. So that's about it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below. Let's have a nice lively discussion down there on what you guys think will happen this year's hurricane season. Put what you think your first forecasts are for the season down below, and let's have a good lively discussion down there and talk about it. And as well, consider liking the video down below and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing for more content like this in the future as we get closer to the beginning of the hurricane season, as we get into the hurricane season, once we get into June and beyond. So thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.